Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 26th episode of Visioncon Spotlight, your in-depth look at the nerds you love. I'm your host, Zach Wilson. But you didn't come here to meet me today. You came to meet the people of the hour. Together, they're the physical and mental health experts who have created a revolutionary podcast with both anime and fitness lovers alike. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome the one, the only Maxwell Hall and Tiffany Crawford of Plus Ultra Fitness Podcast. Guys, how are we doing today?
Good. How are you, Zach? Thanks for having us.
Dandy as candy. So, guys, I will be honest with you. When I first heard about this podcast, I thought there is no way that this works. There is no way that you guys combined both anime, largely an introverted sort of sit down and just prop your feet up interest, and physical fitness, which is the antithesis of that, together into one cohesive unit. But I was wrong. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So before we jump into it, give us a brief introduction between each of you and kind of how we got here. So Max, you start out.
Absolutely. So my name's Max. I've been a personal trainer for about 6 years now. And like Zach mentioned, I started the Plus Ultra Fitness podcast as kind of a way of merging my two passions of anime and fitness together. And I've been watching anime ever since I was a kid. So I'm sure we'll dive more into it, but more or less that's me.
All right, and Tiff, take it away.
Yeah, I'm Tiffany. I am a mental health therapist and have a private practice where I see clients. And also, I'm newer to anime. I only really got really into it at the beginning of the first quarantine, but I'm no stranger to nerd culture. I've been doing comic cons and cosplay in more of the comic book world and superhero realm of nerdy stuff forever. And especially in the last 5 or 6 years as far as attending Comic Cons go. So that's where I'm at with it.
And so then that brings us to the podcast itself. Now, like I said in the intro, I had no idea that this would work as well as it did, but a quick background. So I met Max rather recently at a convention that we both attended. And when I met him, he was wearing some pretty baggy clothing. And I just kind of thought he was just your normal anime fan. That is until he took the baggy clothing off. And then I realized his biceps were the size of my head. And let's remember, ladies and gentlemen, I got a mega mind sized head over here. So we got to talking and you told me about this podcast, and internally, because God forbid I would tell somebody as jacked as you that there's no way this worked. But internally I was like, there's no way this works. And then I listened to a few episodes. I'm like, damn it. As for many times, I was wrong. So I want to ask first kind of where the inspiration came from for this podcast and just kind of how it's developed into what it is today.
Yeah, well, there's quite a bit to that, I guess. So with the podcast, I wanted to start a podcast for a really long time. Like, podcasts are just something I always have loved. For many, many years, I've listened to tons of podcasts. They're one of my favorite pastimes on the way to work, or even while I am working out myself, which is really weird for some people because a lot of people get to like to get really pumped up to music, whereas I'm definitely a lot more chill when I work out. So I like listening to podcasts. So I was like, you know what? I really want to start a podcast, but what kind of podcast do I want to do was kind of the question I had. And I thought about doing like an interview style podcast. I thought about doing a few different things. And I realized that I really loved fitness. And I've been kind of merging anime and fitness in a few different ways before this. So there's a brand called Just Saying Apparel that I started shopping with years ago that made fitness workout clothing. So I started wearing some of my favorite characters' clothing while I was working out. And I started paying attention. I realized that there's a lot of parallels between the messages in anime and how they applied to mental health as well as physical health. So I wanted the opportunity to talk about some of the parallels in between and some of the messages that came with anime and fitness and how they mix together, and just find some fun things to talk about to help educate people about fitness and anime and kind of make it fun. Because like you said, a lot of nerds like ourselves that watch anime, they typically are more introverted people. They like sitting down, but anime kind of has powerful messages of getting up and being a better version of yourself. So I wanted to be able to provide people with education that were maybe a little bit more in the anime realm, make it fun and digestible for them by mixing in the anime, and empower them to get up and get moving.
And then so Tiffany, when you got on the scene, kind of what aspects did you add to it?
Right. So I originally I came on the podcast as an interview guest because I wanted an opportunity to talk about how storytelling and movement can really help with mental health, like anxiety, depression, and trauma. So I originally came on as an interview to talk about that, but I really love nerding out on like psychology of characters. And fortunately, that was something that Max was really wanting to bring to the podcast as well, is breaking down different characters from anime and kind of what makes them tick, how they work, and then what lessons we can take from their character and who they are and their stories and apply them to mental health and fitness. So that's where I come in on the podcast, is we release an episode every week where we've chosen a character and do that breakdown together.
And we'll explore that here in a little bit, because I'm going to give you guys a bit of a preview of what some of the episodes kind of look like. But we saw in the slideshow, which is one of my favorite things, aside from the marketing aspect where you guys make those fun little promo images, but those ideas and concepts that you put in the podcast, it's not straightforward as like, here, if you want to look like Saitama, do all these push-ups, or if you want to look like All Might, you got to do 1 billion sit-ups. You guys also have character analysis. You guys dive deep into just a lot more of the psychology aspect, which, you know, has a lot to do with fitness as well. And I think a lot of people, myself included, that gets lost on people. That's something I find very fascinating about you guys' podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's something interesting. So it's something I decided that I wanted to do not so early on in the podcast. I originally had another co-host named Kim that I started the podcast with. I basically wanted somebody to start it with me so I would have somebody to talk to, because talking to myself seemed kind of weird when I started the podcast. So Kim agreed to come on originally, and then she's like, well, I don't want to be a part of the podcast anymore. I was kind of lost. I'm like, I'm not sure what I want to talk about. So I had been talking to Tiffany about some different character analyses and like some of the psychology and the lessons that could be learned from different characters. Like Asta from Black Clover most famously has his lines about, you know, never giving up, how his magic is never giving up. And, you know, that lesson is pretty easily like digestible into how that apply to fitness or life, as, you know, never giving up and constantly pursuing the things that you want to achieve. So I started doing some of the character analyses and by myself. And then as I started doing those and I started discussing them more with Tiffany, I had asked her to come on and do some of them with me.
And I think that's the cusp of what makes this podcast so easily digestible and, quite frankly, addicting, because shonen anime in and of itself is very easily approachable to a lot of anime fans, which is a lot of shonen anime characters are what you guys focus on, and kind of where a lot of the inspiration comes from these episodes. And so I feel like that is where the cusp of it is that because you focus on that, that's what helps, among other things, obviously, makes the podcast so enjoyable to listen to and, quite frankly, hard to put down. But on that note, for the viewers at home right now that are watching this, what kind of content can they learn to expect to digest from you guys?
Yeah, so we do 3 episodes a week. So on Mondays, we put out some type of fitness related topic. They can really vary from like basics of fitness mixed in with a little bit of anime, or it could be something anime related to how it comes to fitness. Like, is the All Might physique really achievable? How effective is the One Punch Man workout? Or something like, you know, are achieving, you know, anime like physiques really obtainable, and trying to pursue them, is that good for your mental health or not? On Wednesdays, I usually bring on some type of guest that is in the anime fitness community in some type of way, where they like anime, they like fitness, and they put out something into that community that people can get out of it. And then on Saturdays, me and Tiffany do the character analysis episodes together.
And if you guys want to know a couple of my favorite episodes, it's definitely the Body Dysmorphia one and where did the Uraka one go?
Yeah.
So if you guys want a jumping off point, that's where I would definitely recommend, because that's where I started and I absolutely loved those episodes. All right, well, to wrap us up, guys, where can the viewers at home go to find you guys, maybe get a more look into your guys' lives, your cosplays, your workouts, all of the above?
You want to go first?
Sure. So for me, you can find me primarily on Instagram. I'm at Muse Magic. So that's at with an underscore, Muse Magic, and another underscore. And to my page, I usually post cosplay related stuff primarily, but up in my stories, I post fitness related things, mental health, rock climbing, and pole dancing. So you can kind of find a little bit of everything on Instagram.
You guys can find me on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok at Max Hall Fitness. I put out some content on each of them, but primarily most of my content goes on Instagram. Although I think anything I post on Instagram also goes on Facebook. And then you guys can find the podcast also on Instagram at the Plus Ultra Fitness Podcast. And it is available on Spotify, Apple, Google, pretty much any podcast streaming platform, as well as I do put the videos on YouTube as well.
And I got all those links plus a lot more down there in the description box below, guys, for you guys all to check out. And with that said, ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 26 of Visioncon Spotlight. Before we wrap things up, guys, are there any final thoughts to leave us on sage-like wisdom? Anything at all?
Anything.
Sage-like wisdom.
Do you have any sage-like wisdom?
Am I the sage-like wisdom girl?
Always.
Always. I would just encourage people to give it a listen, because they might be really surprised how they find themselves, especially in the character analysis. I was very hesitant to get into anime originally, but once I fell in hard. And there are so many life lessons and just empowering messages in anime. And I think we could all use a little bit of that in our lives right now. And we really like getting feedback from people that listen. And so if there's a character you want to hear us break down, or a topic in the fitness realm, we want to hear it, because we'd be happy to try to do it.
Yes, she's very sage-like. I'm going to go a little bit more corny and just say, go Plus Ultra in any of your life ventures.
There it is. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been episode 26 of Visioncon Spotlight. Thank you so much for watching. As always, I'm your host, Zach Wilson. But much more importantly, this has been my very special guests, Maxwell Hall and Tiffany Crawford of Plus Ultra Fitness Podcast. Thank you for watching, guys. And always remember that life's better when you guys have friends to share it with.